next, I'm looking for the next one. Oh, there are they. Okay. So next we will have a fireside chat about Is Management Dead? Modern leadership, growth and path to business success. So for that we will have a fireside chat, and please join me welcoming the SVP of Strategic Initiative, Yuri Grahig, and founder and leadership coach, Sophie Vu. So please join me welcoming them. This is working. So I'll take this.
Hello everyone. All right. Let's sit here next to each other.
We just don't have a fire, but...
We're missing a fire, but it's warm enough. Hi everyone. This session is going to be a little bit different. We're just going to have a little discussion between ourselves and hopefully with you guys as well around what does management mean today, in today's landscape, what does it mean to be a leader, are the two the same? And before the two of us get into it, I want to pass it over to you and ask who here is a manager? Just show of hands.
Okay, doesn't work.
Let's switch.
Yes. And follow-up question, for the ones who raise their hands, keep their hands up, if you don't mind. So you just have a view, okay. And who in this room is call themselves a leader? Not the managers, okay. Yeah. And who has ended up in this role not really wanting to be in that role? It's a safe space, huh? I hope you don't hear both in the room, okay.
We have one really honest guy.
I'm asking this question because they have been shared in private conversations, so I know it's a reality, it's just not one that a lot of people like to share publicly. But, you know.
Yeah, so it's really...
now
switch
you
mics, now we're on. All right. So, I guess we tend to equate leadership with management. Or we tend to think, oh, if I'm a manager, it means I'm a leader. Or people tend to think, if I'm not a manager, I'm not a leader. But that might not necessarily be the case. So Sophie, I know you've been on a whole journey through your career, and we'll get into that. But you also run a platform called Rise and Play, where you examine these sorts of questions, and you travel the world, and you speak about it, and you engage with leaders all the time. So how do you see that intersection?
Yeah, so there's quite a confusion in leadership and management. That's why it was funny, the people who are in manager roles not seeing themselves as leaders. It's I would say, interesting observation. So yeah, indeed, just to give a bit of background in my career, I have worked 16 years in gaming on the development side, production side, so head of studio, general manager, game lead, product lead, all the titles you can find, and then to the eyes of the management, I was in a role of a manager. What does that mean? I manage a project, I manage an outcome, a result, and I manage resources that are called humans. And that's what is management about. So I spent some time also reading back to the origin of management. Why is it even a thing? And it's some of us have forgotten because of course we move quite fast in the industry. And management came really from back in the 80s, at a time of where more companies started to be organized as a workforce away from factories, and to organize this workforce for an output. We invented management. It came from the West, actually more US, and it's to, in a pure definition, is to optimize an outcome from current resources. So your process, planning, budgeting, your team, and you try to squeeze it to get the maximum of outcome out of it. One problem with that, and that's how I found in my journey, is that we are in a creative field, right? So it's not like we are managing gears in a factory and I compose my team and I have an artist, a designer, and a developer, and they all are equal, right? With different color coding, and I put them together and I have an outcome. We are dealing with humans here, with different motivation, aspirations, skills, creativity, needs to even be creative. And that's where started to emerge the need or the lack of leadership in games, in other very fast-paced industries, creative, because the leadership, in the core definition again, is emerged more in the 2000 actually. It's really about first inspiring, motivating a group towards an outcome or vision. So the role of somebody that is in a leadership role first is to frame a vision, direction where we're going. So it's the work of a lot of founders. For example, you start a new venture, you start a new team, a new project. You are in a mission of a leader rather than a manager because you have no idea first where you're going. So setting the vision and then aligning a group. So that requires more skills than just I hire you, I pay you for a job, please do that. Align a group of people to execute towards that vision. And then other skills are required away from management, which is managing, but it's influencing, communication, having even a clarity of vision, so quite also creative thinking. And that's a lot of things that are misunderstood in the world, and that's why we see quite I would say, bad things happening in companies, treating basically work that requires more leadership than management. Does that speak to you, what I'm describing, or it's something, it's a safe space, I hope. We are not like a big crowd, not recorded, I don't know, maybe.
I think we're being recorded, yeah.
Yeah, we are recorded, you are not, so anyway. I hope that it resonates with you, and those things are more spoken in private circles than in public. That's why I'm sharing this,
Yeah, that's why it's a fireside chat, intended to discuss about things we normally wouldn't. I think you said something super impactful when you said management was invented, or we invented management. Yeah, definitely, right? It's a relatively modern role of being a manager, but it's a role, it's a job description. Whereas leadership is not something we invented, it's something that's innate to human beings. It's how we work as a species, how other species that work in large social groups also function. There will always be a leader, and this is a natural process. Leaders just arise. But in our modern lives, in this sort of process where we work in organizations, this natural phenomena of leadership doesn't always align with the invented phenomena of management. So this brings us to the topic of official or unofficial leaders, right? Because I think you guys will relate that not every manager is a leader, but then groups, and I think this happens in most teams, groups will have unofficial leaders that people just follow, right? And they're not necessarily the manager. Now the problem is if we're working in an organization that's not conscious of that, and I think a lot of times ego comes into play, or like a way of functioning that's not very conscious comes into play. What I mean by that is if you have an official manager who's not performing as a leader, someone else will arise as the unofficial leader, because that's how humans work. And if the manager is not capable of recognizing and handling that, we're going to have a problem. So, and that can be, I think that can be very hard for everyone involved, for the people on the team, for the sort of unofficial leader, who's feeling like maybe, you know, they're not getting their just due, they're not being seen, but also for the manager, who maybe feels like they're being challenged. And if we don't recognize this internally, and I think if we don't have the space to talk about it, this can lead to very bad culture. So I've also had my journey, I had my ups and downs, had my failures, had my successes, but mostly I've worked inside organizations, whereas Sophie also works as a consultant with various organizations, so, and also as a leadership coach. So I want to ask you, like, if you run into this situation of the managers not being a leader, other leaders are rising, maybe they're not given time to shine, like, what are ways to recognize that? How can people in this room who are maybe relate, well, like, what can they do about it?
The word that comes to mind for me, and I do that a lot in, of course, now in my work, coaching founders, even executives, it's ego, unfortunately. It's like that's the word that comes from me, because how management happens is like you have a promotion, you've done really well at your job, and then you go through the career ladder to have just more salary, more responsibility, and you do actually less of what you're good at, and you have to manage people. So manage is a lot on control, and suddenly you start to see that you're not so good at what you're doing. You fail at this because people don't like you, don't want to follow your plan. So that happens also quite often because you're disconnected, but you are here to control the outcome. And so that's an uncomfortable place to, I would say, for people who have been named managers, because sometimes people are put in the roles, cornered in the roles of managers or leaders, mostly managers. They don't want it. To admit to yourself that you're not in the right place. And that's what gets in the way is ego. Because if you define your identity by your title, your status, you will never overcome that realization to say, I'm maybe not in my zone of genius, what I'm supposed to do. And maybe in that team I have somebody much more passionate of leading, of gathering the group, framing a vision, creative, that could put more energy into it, and nobody in the organization have noticed that person. And that's maybe the opportunity, I would say, of the courage you have to say, I'm not the right person in the right role, I think we should promote that person. I've rarely seen that or never, but what gets in the way is like the level of awareness and the courage to say, I don't define my worth by the title. And I can be an expert, a senior, developer, artist, and I step away. And I've seen some cases also in my career, some have admitted it, but it was facilitated by a dialogue. So I was also the lead in that department, and then just asking questions, and then how are you doing? How do you enjoy your role? How do you feel you're doing at this? And people realize for themselves, like, you know what, I just don't want to have that role anymore. So that could be also facilitated by the organization or the lead in charge who understands the whole system.
So you're saying, in a way, to reach sort of more optimal outcomes, honesty is sort of the key, putting the ego aside, and usually it takes other people helping to facilitate this realization. Did I summarize that?
Yeah.
Okay, right?
Yeah. And it requires also the right culture, that it feels safe to do that, right? So.
But it's also very difficult. Here I would maybe share a personal story. I feel it's very relevant. I used to run a marketing agency. So now I work at ZBD. I'm super happy in my role. I have sexy strategic initiatives job. I travel the world. I speak at conferences. But I don't really manage a large team anymore. I'm not the end decision maker. I'm definitely a leader, I'm not the leader. I used to be the leader. I used to run a marketing agency that I started when I was really young, like early 20s. And that went super well, like surprisingly well. You know, early 20s guy, hire my friends who run an agency. Suddenly we're working for international tech companies, and this is happening out of a small town in Slovenia. I was like, wow, amazing. You know, you can imagine I felt like I was a badass dude, you know. 6 years later, it's not going so amazingly anymore. And we're finding it hard, or I'm finding it hard to find new clients, finding it that the business I'm able to get is killing me, you know, it's not enjoying it, and the company was going downhill. And I was really like, why is this not working anymore? And for a while I was saying, yeah, you know, the market is turning, it's getting hard to run an agency. But that's a bullshit excuse, because you can always start a business, you can always start any business in most verticals, and if you have the drive and the vision, you will succeed. But I wasn't succeeding anymore, and it came to a point where I had to admit to myself the reason it's not working out for the company is that it's not working out for me. And accept that I'm actually not the right person to lead this anymore, because I honestly didn't want to do it. I got super fed up with it. I didn't even want to work in marketing anymore, and I was just doing it because when I felt a responsibility to my people, for them to have jobs. Like this time I had 11 employees. It's not huge, right? But at 11 you really feel a responsibility, for it's like a family. And the other thing that it was hard for my ego to accept that maybe I'm not this badass wunderkind who can build a international tech consultancy agency in his early 20s and just have it scale and scale and scale for like 10 plus years. But there was no other way. And when I had this realization, I said, fuck it, time to kill it, and it does not serve my team well if I keep dragging this along. Let's kill it now before we go bankrupt, because I'm trying to push this because I feel like I'm regressing if I'm no longer the leader. And this was a while back, but to this day, this hurts me. I think it was the right move. I will never not see it also as a failure. But this kind of stuff happens, and even before, I was always saying to people who were asking me for advice, like junior people, you don't have to always be like a manager. Not everyone needs to start their own company, start their own startup, raise VC money. You don't have to be that guy, right? You can just do a job very well and be successful in that and be happy. I didn't really take that advice for myself until I really had to, because stuff was not working out. So, just wanted to kind of share that story, and up to you guys to decide if that's a leadership win, to recognize that and kill it in time. Now I hope so. Or if it's in the end still a fail because 11 people lost their job. But hey, I'm much happier now. Like I said, sweet ass life, strategic initiatives in a global startup.
Yeah, thanks for it. This is quite a hard story to quit when sometimes you feel responsible. We get into that as well. I think this is it's funny because for context, you and I know also as good friends, so that's also what makes this Fireside chat special. But the way you share it now is not the way I've heard it. Like, I can feel the load with it. And this is also, I would say, from an act of leadership where you first honest to yourself. So leadership also not just leading others, but leading the self. And in those situations, you can look at the situation from different perspectives, as we see layoffs in this industry. And then, from the outside, you can say, well, you've done a bad job, you destroyed jobs, just because you couldn't continue anymore. But one argument for the ones being in the shoes, if you have no juice, you're leading nothing. You're leading nothing. You wake up with no motivation, inspiration. You are responsible for a group of people. You're dishonest to yourself, and then you're dishonest to the group. So that's where everyone has to make their own decision and own it. And that's even in this outcome, it's an act also of leadership, but more to the self first. That's more.
Yeah. I'd like to add something here and then do a little prompt. So I'm not at I'm a high executive role now, but I'm not C-level. I do think I'm hardcore still a leader, and I can't not be. I can't enter a team and not act as a leader. It's just not gonna work. It comes out naturally, regardless of title. So it's not about the role you have. It's not are you a manager or not to be acting as a leader. You can be a game designer is always a leader. That's a bad example. But you can, or kind of also a manager. You can be a designer, an artist, and act as a leader on the team. Maybe not in a managerial role, dividing tasks, but certainly in a cultural role. And that said, I want to do another prompt to you guys and ask again what we asked at the start. After listening to the conversation, who here feels like they are acting as a leader or has a leadership role? The show of hands.
That's nice, huh?
A little bit different than the start.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And it has its weight, like you with a leader, because we have some archetype. They are maybe not the best archetype, but it's very simple. If you have people who believe in what you're carrying forward, around leadership, that's change. So it's an agent of change. Management is about managing the status quo, optimizing the status quo. So you can remember, if you have a group where you're carrying a change with, you are leading, whether you like it or not. You're just doing it already.
Nice. And with this very motivational, not speech, but it's very, very nice words you just shared with us. I realized we're kind of chugging along on the timeline, and Sophie, would be such a shame if we didn't touch on the role of coaching and the role of personal transformation in the leadership journey. Because now we see that already in a short conversation, some people change their opinions on leadership and their own view of themselves as a leader in the crowd. So could you maybe take us through a little bit about your practice and how you help organizations and leaders?
Yeah, so in the context of evolution, like with more awareness on, okay, we come from a school of management, and I'm sure some maybe part of the organization had management training, and it's people that come from big corporate, and you know, there's an argument you say is like corporation have ruined everything in games. We have some quite old methods to address like new ways of working, so that's where my work has been deeper in like the coaching and working closely with founders, also executives and entrepreneurs in that journey. And a lot of that work is around more self-leadership, so leading the self before you can even, because there are officially titles when you are the founder, CEOs, like you are in a leadership role, right? Because that's by your title. But most of the time, the ones that I work with, they have troubles to lead themselves because there's a dilemma of decisions, so many decisions to make on a daily basis that are pulling different directions that are not them. So you have what investors want, what the team wants, what the market wants, and you, what do you want? And if you're not listening to that, you can't lead anything. You're leading, you know, as just with no vision, and that's quite common actually. So some founders that ask me, I don't know if I should raise money. It's like, I don't know either for you, but you should know why. And not just because your neighbors is doing it and you have some FOMO, and there's that bucket of money that's gonna, you know, leave. No, have a vision why, because if from the moment you take external money, you commit to deliver at a certain scale and to return at a certain multiplier. There's a reality. So there's a lot of lack of clarity I work with, and sometimes it goes really deep into maybe I didn't want to build a company, and that's a very uncomfortable truth. But I can tell you, I met also founders who got in the game, didn't ask themselves that question, and they're leading a company without wanting to lead a company, and where you went through that process, and it's painful for the people who are embarking on this journey. And I would say even worse for investors that expect something to come out of it, but nothing will come out of it. It's just surviving. So I'd say the most responsible thing I see is it's hard for also people in this position to find themselves say, I think I need help, but just bringing awareness, and even investors that say also to be aware also what they're investing in. And there's so much lack of awareness in this field at the moment. But it comes down again, like leading the self, knowing yourself. And if you have heard about that often, it's really not bullshit, because it's at the very heart is, if you know why you're in this journey, then it's much easier than just because you've done it to get external validation. And what's behind this, at last, I'd say, is just most of the motivation is I want to be enough, I want to prove myself that I can do it. It's not a good reason to start a company. It shouldn't be that reason.
And I think this also applies to people who are not necessarily founders or C-level executives, right? I don't know, I think we live in this hyper-media, hyper-capitalist world where success is seen as climbing the ladder. That's not always success. So what I'm hearing you say over and over is honesty with yourself, understanding what you really want, and it can be a shock when that doesn't align with this sort of value of climb, get promoted, go on, get further. So if we're talking about leadership on a personal level, I think it's exactly the same as what you were talking about. When I say personal level, what I mean is like something people can relate to, right? Because not everyone's a founder or wants to be, and you can be aware, oh, I don't want to be a founder. That doesn't mean you're not fit to be a leader. That doesn't mean you can't sort of take in this, let's call it leadership knowledge, or these things that people then go to coaching to discover, these sort of lessons that always come down to one thing. Understand what you want and have the courage to take it. Even if it's not necessarily what sort of the wider world or the management structures in your company are telling you to do, right? If you don't want to go from being an individual contributor to being a manager because you don't like managing people, that's fine. It doesn't mean you're not a leader. You can lead in other ways. We're 1 minute out, huh?
Okay, so if you're done already?
Yeah, do we have time for a Q&A?
Yeah, some reaction. Because, that's what we were inviting in this, trying to get some, I don't know, reactions, reflection.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys, for the interesting chat. We would kindly ask you guys if you have any questions or any feedback, any reactions for the lady and gentleman.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yep.
The mic, maybe?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, so, I mean, I love the concept. Leadership, management are definitely two different spaces, and, you know, the way that you put the idea of leadership being, you know, you can lead from any sort of position. I guess my question is, when you have a calling towards leadership or something like that, when you have a dream or a plan or something that you want to do you have any sort of tips on how to actually promote the qualities of leadership in yourself so that you can then be the leader that you're wanting to be? Like, is there a particular, like, I guess that's the idea of the leadership coach part is my question, but is there essentially a sort of a roadmap that you see again and again, or is it very kind of individually based?
Yeah, I can pick that one. Very good question, thank you. What's your name, sir?
I'm Sam.
I'm Sam. Because that's what I go through as well in the coaching, and I can say it's confidence. I know it's like simple thing that way, but sometimes like all the fears, like, oh, I could do this and that, and I really want to do this, and like asking the question, what stops you from starting tomorrow? Yeah, but maybe I need a whole team to do this. It's like, do you? And then it's like, no, and then like just talking out through the fears, and concretely, what does that mean? A concrete step is start to do it. Like passing, really overcoming the hurdle of fear, and just doing it and learning, and you will see that it's not that bad. And then you're moving towards the change you want.
Yeah, like don't hold yourself back.
And
Yeah.
I would add that, you know, if it's about specific steps on the roadmap, then seek out a mentor, right? Because everything we're talking about here, it's about motivation, courage to start, confidence. But then you still need, you know, actual specific experience and knowledge. But part of leading yourself, self-leadership, is if you feel like you're not sure what the steps are, seek out a mentor and just ask for help. And I think Sophie touched on it earlier also, ask for help.
Yeah.
It's also a hard thing to do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. So I assume there is nothing else here. You also are guys welcome to approach to the guys here privately after the discussion if they got time, and you're very welcome to ask them questions or whatever you'd like to. So thank you very much and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.